All right, the final lessons on believing. And over a 4-day span, Jesus takes his disciples full circle on what he had previously taught them on believing. And his days are short, but his message is long. And he boils believing down to 3 main points. 1, believe like a child. 2, move your mountains. And 3, remember to remember. And we're going to hit each of these. And today we learn Jesus' final lessons in believing. Now I have to give you a little background running up to this. Now people from all over the world were converging on Jerusalem for Passover. It was huge. And Jesus and his disciples and many of their travel-able family had just made a 70-mile walk down from Galilee together. And it's 1 week before Passover, 1 week before Jesus sacrifices his life. It's Wednesday. And they passed through Jericho, and Jesus healed not 1, not 2, but 4 of his favorite blind guys. And they'd witnessed the little bad guy turned good, Zacchaeus, change his heart and vow to give away half of his wealth and repay people 4 times, 400%, if he had defrauded them. This guy had a change of heart. And I was thinking how people speak very loudly when they let their finances do the talking. And on Thursday, they walked to Jerusalem. 6 days to go, 6 days to live, 6 days to finalize his training of his disciples. He knows it. And Jesus is crazy famous, far more than he wants to be. He's the most loved and the most hated man on earth. He still is. And that same day, Thursday, to fulfill a prophecy, he rides into the city on a donkey with 1 colt in tow, and he gets people's attention by throwing over the tables of these money changers and the benches of those who sold doves for sacrifice. This is the first of 2 times he does this. And this is the first of 2 times he rides in, which is going to be taught next week. And remember, this is the time of year that makes these guys their budget. This keeps them in the black, Passover, and the business that comes from all over the Roman Empire. There's a lot of coin coming into town. And they took a percentage of every transaction. And they're not supposed to do business in the temple, but nobody was stopping them, probably because they were paying off the priests. Usually how that stuff works. And the common people go nuts for Jesus. And this is the guy they'd heard about. And he's in town. And he's in the temple right now. And they want to see him and that guy named Lazarus, who was recently raised from the dead. This is just over the course of a couple of weeks this had happened. How would they feel? Now people from all over the world are beginning to hear about this Jesus guy and his miracles. The first final lesson in believing. Believe like a child. Matthew 21, 14 through 16. 14. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. Now he had just caused a big ruckus. But all these blind people and these lame people, they start dragging themselves up to him. They start finding their way to Jesus. Verse 15, and when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying in the temple saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were sore displeased. It's funny how they saw wonderful things, but they hated it. 16, and said unto him, Hearest thou what these say? So now these religious guys are confronting Jesus. Do you hear what they're saying? And Jesus said to them, Yea, yes. Have ye not read, out of the mouths of babes and suckling thou hast perfected praise? He's saying this to the religious guys. See, immediately after cleaning up the temple on the Sabbath, he was approached by the blind and the lame. Now was their chance. They'd heard the commotion. They found out that it was Jesus the Christ, the healer. He's here. He's close. I'm going to go next. I'm going to get as close as I can to him. And imagine all these sick people making their way to Jesus. And remember the disciples, how they protected him through Jericho. So now it's a mob. Imagine the blind leading the blind to the exact spot Jesus was. And remember, this would have been a huge crowd. These people really wanted to be near him. And if you had heard about this guy, Jesus, and all the things that he did, and you had a need, you wanted to get healed, you wanted something, would you do whatever it took to get near him? I mean, just think, these guys, some of them had to drag themselves or talk somebody into carrying them, leading them, or just feeling their way to this guy's voice. Wouldn't you have done that? I think, what a sight when people are gaining their sight. See, people are getting healed right and left. Everyone in town took notice. The priests saw this too and got jealous. The apostles, including Judas, was there. At the same time Jesus was doing all this stuff, and probably even his mom was there. And John's mom. Don't you think she knew he had told them a few days prior that he was going to be killed and tortured? If you were his mom, wouldn't you want to spend every last second with him? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She was going to stick as close to him as glue. After he healed all those people, can you imagine the joy that was in that courtyard? At the same time, the anger with all the people that he had run out of there? What a mixture of emotion that was going on in Jerusalem. The excitement was so thick you could touch it. And the crowd grew bigger and bigger. The noise became louder and louder. Now all of a sudden the children got together and they began to scream, "Hosanna to the Son of David." And this was a common greeting of the day. And it means stay safe and prosper. Or stay free, Jesus. Live free. Or we love you, Son of David. And these are little kids screaming this above the noise of the crowd. The leaders went nuts with envy. Probably Judas did too. So many people teach that Judas was just trying to expedite Jesus in bringing back the kingdom. I don't believe that is true at all. I don't believe that's true. He was jealous and he was a thief. He got turned. I mean, it's so clear if you just open the Bible and read it. And Jesus comments about the simple believing mindset of a child and how great it is. This word perfect praise means it's a total accurate and complete comment. It's full. It's fully thought through. It's as big as it can get. And this is coming from kids. Perfect praise is pure, innocent, uncut believing. It's not bastardized. It hasn't been stepped on. Nothing's been added to it. It's pure stuff, dudes. It's like the simple, pure words of a child. Perfect praise is fully formed thoughts. It's complete believing. It's where believing starts. Remember we talked a few weeks ago about self-talk? And what drives our head? These kids, at that point, that's all it was Jesus Christ, you're amazing. pure. There's no fluff, no pork, no excuses. These kids had vision, and Jesus pointed it out to the disciples and to these religious leaders. They said what they believed, no matter who's watching. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. You'll always talk about what you really believe. They said exactly what they pictured in their minds. That is pure, uncut believing. Talk about what you visualize. And visualize what you talk about. Here's a Japanese proverb. Vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. See, Jesus pointed this out time and time again over the months about childlike believing. Childlike believing is perfect believing. It's perfect. It's pure. It's not mixed with anything else. There's no ulterior motives. It's just pure. I want it. I'm going to get it. There's no confusion. Now, a little more background to help understand this. Now it's Friday. TGIF. And if I just did one of those healings or just did one of those amazing things that day, I'd call it good. You know, I would have put my head down with a smile and gone to sleep. But Jesus just keeps going. I may just brag about that the rest of my life. And I do. You know, the few things we do, but Jesus has just kept, now it's cascading. It's like an avalanche of believing, an avalanche of learning that's coming through. But he just tames it with these 3 points. First one is what? Childlike believing. Believe like a child. Matthew 21:17 says, and he left them and went out of the city unto Bethany, and he lodged there. So now we're at the end of a day. At supper that night, the sister of Lazarus poured some super expensive oil on Jesus' feet and wipes it with her hair. What she poured was worth a year's wage. Judas went nuts. See, this is a whole nother study, which you might hit on a Thursday, about Judas's mindset, the turning of Judas. I mean, it's funny how this happens. Jesus, the disciples, and many that came down from Galilee with him, they slept outside that night. And the word lodge means staying in the open air or in the wind. Now you got to remember, there's people from all over the world. Jerusalem is getting packed and more packed every day as it gets closer to Passover. So there wasn't much room for people. Had all their friends and family in too, in their houses, probably including Lazarus and Mary and Martha. They were wealthy. Why would Jesus have to sleep in the outside? Well, they probably slept in their clothes, and I'd be willing to bet that Jesus might have been offered to sleep inside, but he chose to sleep out with his men and with his mom and with his friends. Wouldn't you? Most people would. A true leader would. An approachable leader would. Whatever Jesus did and taught that day blew many people's minds. The word doesn't go into great detail, and the lawyers and the priests went to bed with murder on their minds. And the religious leaders plotted murder while Jesus Christ dreamed of salvation. And all that happened was about the same day that they walked maybe 18 miles from Jericho. It's amazing focus. It's a busy day. See, they may have stayed the night in Jericho, some researchers say, at Zacchaeus' house. And then they walked up the next day, which is probably the case, because no meal happens fast in that culture. So as far as I can tell, Jesus takes a Sabbath day off, which is Friday evening to Saturday evening. He's probably at Lazarus' home in Bethany, about 2 miles east of Jerusalem. And the huge crowd that walked down with him from Galilee may have stayed out in this courtyard along with him. See, there was still no room at the inn. It's full circle, from manger to manger. Isn't that crazy? Just thought about that this morning. See, Jesus is going to take them full circle also with these lessons on believing. Now on Sunday, so we skipped this day. There isn't much that I can tell happened on Saturday. Now I know there's a lot of different harmonies of gospels and time frames, and everyone you read looks right. Not everyone, but a lot of them, they look right. So it's really hard to tell. And so if my day's off, don't hate me, okay? But on Sunday, Jesus makes another ride to Jerusalem to see the temple. And this time he takes only one donkey. And this time he only looks at the temple and he weeps at the corrupt city of Jerusalem. And a multitude of people, again, this time more people, they threw their clothes down, they tore branches off of trees and threw them down in front of him. They just wanted to honor Jesus Christ. This guy was the greatest show on earth, the greatest man on earth. See, nothing is much said after that entry. He doesn't talk about a teaching, doesn't talk about kids. I'm sure we'll hear more about that next week. So he goes back to Bethany for the night. And how you can track the days is just track the words Bethany or Bethpage, and you can see where the breaks are in here. It's fairly simple. So now lesson number 2 in believing, move your mountains. It's time to move your mountains. And I'm saying to any of you out there, if you have things, obstacles in your life, it's time now to move them. You've learned so much about believing over the last year or so. Let's put it together. And usually it works just as well when the pressure's on as when there's no pressure. It's Monday morning now. Jesus heads to Jerusalem for another day of teaching. Every day he would go back in, except for on the Sabbath probably, and he would teach. And now be careful you don't overlook the big lesson of the day because you've heard these next few verses so often. Just try to keep supple so you can receive this, because it's real easy to all of a sudden turn off when you hear things you've read 100 times. Mark 11. We're going to start in verse 12. And on the morrow, this is probably Monday, when they were come from Bethany, it's 2 miles, it's about a 2-mile walk, he was hungry. Maybe he left without breakfast. Maybe he didn't like the continental breakfast. He didn't want the little roll wrapped in that plastic. You can only eat that so many days before you get sick of them. He didn't want the Cheerios in the little container, at Microtel. And that 2% skim milk. So he just was going to take his chances on the local vending machines. And he came from Bethany. He was hungry. And verse 13, and seeing a fig tree afar off, so he wasn't right up on it. It was afar off. You can tell it's a fig tree. He came if happily he might find anything thereon. So did Jesus Christ know everything? No, because if he did, why would he have done this? Did God talk to him all the time? No. That's why you got a brain. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. Now, Jesus had been anticipating a little brunch fresh from the branch. And Jesus walked up to this fig tree that he'd probably seen every day that he walked in. I'm going to get a snack off of that one, someday. It just pops into your head. Now, I'm sure nobody noticed things like Jesus did. But in the spring, when fig trees shed forth their leaves, a little mini fig comes out at the same time. And it sort of tastes like a fig because it is. And so now it's supposed to come out, but this tree did not. He was fully expecting it, but this tree, it didn't have it. The leaves were there, but there was none of those little figs. And so Jesus was expecting a snack, but the disciples were about to get a real treat. They were about to get a real life lesson, or the first half, part A. And the fig trees grew all over the place in that type of climate. And that particular tree was empty of fruit. And the tree didn't have those tasty buds that popped out at the same time as the leaves. Now, if you study this, you'll know that it takes wasps to get these, certain kind of wasp to get these figs to open up or to pollinate. I don't know all the things about that, but this tree, this didn't happen to. And now, Jesus wouldn't have walked up to this tree if he didn't think it would have fruit. But we're going to watch how Jesus turns disappointment into a lesson. And that's good for us, too. Something doesn't go the way you want. I mean, you could kick the tree. You know? I mean, you could slug it, out of anger or beat your head against it. But what good does that do? Why don't you turn it into a lesson? Watch it. He turns it into a lesson of believing. Verse 14, and Jesus answered and said unto it, the tree, no man eat fruit of thee thereafter forever. No one's going to eat from you anymore. It's never going to happen. And the disciples heard it. See, the word answer, of course, doesn't mean the tree spoke to him and he answered the tree. It simply means that he responded to what just happened. He answered to the situation. And Jesus spoke directly to the tree like you might have talked to a break room vending machine that was empty or didn't spin you out your little package of Frito-Lays, or whatever. I mean, we've all been there. You wanted the Coke and the cup didn't come down, just the juice. It's like, what? It's like, what the? I came all the way down here and you're empty? You didn't give me a cup? That's sort of what he did. But he told the fig tree that it was dying. You could say he cursed it, but he didn't say that he cursed it. He just said, hey, nobody's going to eat from this thing again. This machine's empty. This machine's going to the garbage heap. And I love how it says the disciples heard him. And this is huge. Now, some teach this with a comedic slant. Like, hello, now this guy's talking to trees. I think I'll act like I didn't see anything. It's like, like the disciples heard it, if you know what I'm talking about. But there's more to this than that. I think this leads to a greater lesson that's going to happen the next day. Jesus realizes that these guys are finally paying attention. They're finally noticing the obvious. Jesus needs to see that the training is beginning to pay off. It's hard to break out of our own little worlds. It's real hard. See, I don't know if Jesus already knew the outcome of this lesson on believing, because it's a two-part lesson separated by 24 hours. But nonetheless, he was aware that they were aware of what he just did. They were right there. They walked up to the tree with him. Now Jesus and the gang, they go into Jerusalem. They go through the walls. They go through these dusty streets. And he's going to clean house once again, just like he did the prior Thursday. He's not riding a donkey this time. And the thieving vendors that he ran out 4 days ago were back, and they were ready for business. Mark 11:15. I'm going to read it from the Message. And they arrived at Jerusalem. We're going to read 15 through 18. Mark 11:15 through 18. Immediately on entering the temple, Jesus started throwing out everyone who had set up shop there, buying and selling. He kicked over the tables of the bankers and the stalls of the pigeon merchants. He didn't let anyone even carry a basket through the temple. And he taught them, quoting this text, "My house was designed a house of prayer for the nations, but you've turned it into a hangout of thieves." He was not using his inside voice. 18. The high priest and religion scholars heard what was going on and plotted how they might get rid of him. They panicked, for the entire crowd was carried away by his teaching. See, this time he kicked over the tables. Money rolled around. He stopped anyone from carrying things through the temple. He breaks out into a teaching. See, the religious people really wanted to get rid of him now because it's cutting into their profits. It's cutting into their business. That's usually when people get serious about something, when it hits their wallet. Religious people always want to shut down those who are truly free. So Jesus walks into the temple. Now they're selling things again. They're using the temple for a market. He kicks over the table. He runs out people. Can you imagine him just going ape? He could have done it, if you think, could he have done it gentle? And, "Oh, by the way, kind sir, I just want to remind you that it's wrong of you to be here. Would you mind leaving? If you don't mind, would you please just pack up your money and go? Take your birds and go." You think they would have left? It already happened a couple of days prior, and now they're back. These are bold guys. This is their money season. This is Christmas. He was intense. Now imagine how mad these bankers would be to see their money rolling and mingling with the other bankers' money. Imagine going to the bank. Two people just got their checks cashed. They have money in their hands, and somebody walks up in between them, takes their money, and throws it up in the air. Would that make you happy? No. That's how they would have felt when Jesus was there. They didn't have big vaults. These people were not happy that Jesus was there at that time. Again, can you imagine that you're selling pigeons for sacrifice and these cages are falling off the table, they're busting open, and the birds fly. The birds fly away along with your profits? Can you imagine the commotion in the area of the temple where commerce was taking place? He didn't even let somebody carry a basket through the temple. Jesus ran around and stopped everybody from doing anything they weren't supposed to do. He was on a one-man mission. Put it down. Stop it. Don't go a step further. Stop. He was running all over that temple area. These were regular people who were used to going to the temple to buy stuff on that day because they didn't care anymore. They didn't think the word applied to them. You think these people were screaming back at him? I'll bet. Boy, bae. No, I'm sure they were not happy. These religious guys needed a way to sway the popular opinion, and they needed it to happen quickly. There had to be a way. there was some key that was missing. They were plotting and plotting and plotting for weeks and weeks and weeks, but they couldn't find a way to really get to Jesus. The disciples, does it say that they helped him do all this stuff? The apostles? Just try to picture Jesus just going nuts in that temple. And this might have gone on the whole rest of the day because nothing else is recorded. They watched him. Judas watched him. Think he would take kindly to somebody knocking his money all over the place? No. This must have gone on for hours. And to top it off, earlier that day, he had talked to a tree. You know, you got to just think, all the families there, it's getting busier and busier. He talks to this tree. He walks into town. He just goes to town, turning over tables, keeping everybody from doing any kind of commerce or doing anything in that temple. Judas finally loses it. See, later that night is what's going to be called the Last Supper. And it's when Jesus is betrayed as well as he institutes the memorial of communion. Judas walks out into the darkness to betray the Savior of mankind. It's pretty crazy. But there's just so many things built up to this man's craziness. Now back to the tree. It was the disciples who brought this this now dead tree to his attention. We're going to see in just a second. They finally noticed something. Mark 11, verse 20. And in the morning, as they passed by, the fig tree dried up from the roots. Now it died fast. And they can have pretty prolific root systems. It's a dry region of the country. Fig trees can have a pretty big root system. It could be the thing was uprooted somehow. I don't know. I don't know why. From the roots up, how would they know if they didn't see the roots? So, pretty weird. In the morning they passed by, saw the tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, saith unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. Now, I love it. Peter noticed. He's been trying to get Peter to open his eyes and see things for so long. And he saw something that Jesus Christ didn't even point out. He's walking next to Jesus and nudges him with his elbow, pointing to that fig tree that Jesus Christ told he was going to die. He said, Behold, which you cursest, that it withered away. Again, Jesus didn't mention it. He noticed that they noticed. Believing is all about fixated, focused, and concentrated change. Believing is focused change. All you can see. Remember the lesson of the child? That's all I can see is what I want. I can't see it. It's total blinders. All I can see is what I want. Peter's seeing what Jesus wants him to see. He's noticing more than just himself now. He's thinking of more than just himself now. That was a whole lesson we learned last week. Zig Ziglar said, I don't care how much power, brilliance, or energy you have, if you don't harness it and focus it on a specific target and hold it there, you're never going to accomplish as much as your ability warrants. Verse 22, Mark 11. And Jesus answered and saith unto them, Have faith in God. Okay, that sounds very religious. But the text reads, have the believing of God. If you look at the word God, it's not Elohim. It just means like a deity. Have the believing of a deity. Have the believing of a God. Or of God. He's getting their mind around back to this dominion thing where these guys have power. What does that mean? He just told his disciples to have the believing of God. Have the same believing that God has. Does God get results? Hey, you ask him for, every day you ask God for some result, right? Heard some good stuff this week about results that people prayed for. See, believing is complete expectation. It's full. There's no room for doubt. There's no room for distraction. You want something, go get it. If God already supplied our need, it has to be there, right? If you have the believing of God, you think you can have whatever you want? Think about it. If you have the believing of God, do you have any lack? What does God own? The universe, and all through time. That's a pretty good vision. Just think about it. Jesus is saying you can have it all. As we learn to incorporate God's timeless, eternal, unchanging viewpoint into our mindset, believing will be a snap. Receiving will be just as easy, and we'll have everything that we believe for. Now it comes to the follow-up lesson of the day. Now he's going to go into these two great verses that every Christian uses when they want to believe for something. Look at all the buildup it took to get to this point. Now, this example he has used at least twice before. At least twice. Verse 23, "For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say to this mountain," go ahead and fall down on your knees, folks, "Be thou removed and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith." Remember the child thing? This is all a lead up to this. "Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when you pray," remember perfected praise. You see, "believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." There was a tiny mountain right there. You could see just maybe the tip of when they were in the temple area. It was called the Mount of Olives. It wasn't a mountain like Pikes Peak. It was a rise. Look up the word mountain in the Greek, and it just means a rise from the plains. It's a bump in the plains. It doesn't matter what size. It doesn't matter what size of a problem you have. It's just a bump. It's just a bump in the road. It's a bump in the plain. Mount of Olives. Now it was 30 to 40 miles to the Mediterranean Sea. It was 25 miles southeast to the Dead Sea. It was 70 miles north to the Sea of Galilee. They all knew where these seas were. And they all knew that's a pretty big claim. See, we've read this so much that it may not mean anything anymore. But just think of the context of this. All the stuff he knows he's walking into his death. Every day he's closer. Every hour he's closer. His men know that it's all going to come to a head. There's going to be an attack. Something bad's going to happen. Yet he's teaching these miraculous things. He's building on what he taught. These guys are going into a deadly situation with him. He's going to be gone, and they're the ones who have to carry on his ministry. He just has hours left to finish these teachings, to get them to the point they can finally fully see themselves doing the works that he did. Pretty cool and greater. Believing at that level is a fact, a truth, a reality. Can you see it as clearly as a child does? Or is our mind so cluttered? Is our hard drive full? Full thoughts, full believing thoughts, and boom, it's there. Doesn't take years, it takes seconds. Now, of course, some things take longer than others. That's okay. That's life. Sometimes you got to grow a little bit. It's cool. If you're believing in there today, get it there tomorrow or the next day. Just keep working on it. See, nothing else is going to fit in but that one believing thought. That's focused believing. That's what we're talking about here. You see, it's a full thought, a complete thought. Boom! And you have it. You have the healing. You have the longer life. You have the finances, the job, whatever it is. You can't take anything from it or add anything to it. Boom, you're full. That's what I want. There's no room for anything else. Any little other thought kicks in, boom, you just reject it. Anything that doesn't fit, it's full. It's a total full cup. Nothing can be added, nothing can be subtracted. It's closed. That's believing. If you need healing, I'm telling you, healing's available. When it seems hopeless, there's hope. Look at the blind people who stumbled their way to Jesus over and again, who screamed their lungs out a few days prior. Look at the people who limped or dragged themselves up to him in that courtyard after he just raised hell and got healed. And got healed. Nobody trips over mountains. It's the rocks that cause you to stumble. Step over the rocks, step over the mountains. Author unknown. Now, the third and final lesson on believing is remember to remember. And we saw that when they were, a few months ago when they were in that storm-tossed boat. And they go, Master, we perish. And he said, hey, you guys, if you had just remembered the feeding of the 5,000, you could have stopped this storm. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Remember to remember. It's the same lesson again. A little different angle. Judas had left by this point to betray him. This is during the Last Supper, after the supper's over. And they finished their supper, and they were about to walk to the Mount of Olives with Jesus. It was nighttime. And what he had said earlier was really going to happen. The pressure was on. The pressure was thick. It couldn't have been fun knowing what they knew. This was the final lesson on the believing. This had to pull everything together. He had taught them all these things before. Now we're going to go to Luke chapter 22 and read one verse, 35. You could read the context of this, but this is a gem. This is a diamond on top of a ring that's in the section that he taught. He taught a lot of things. But here's one thing. And here's the final lesson on believing. Remember to remember. And he said unto them, the 11, and maybe whoever else was in that room, when I sent you with purse and script and shoes, lacked ye anything, or without, excuse me. And he said unto them, when I sent you without purse, with no money, and script and shoes, lacked ye anything? And they said, nothing. Remember when he sent them out to go try out this Holy Spirit thing that they had, and they cast out devils. They healed people. They did crazy good stuff. And they had all their need met. They had their shelter. They had their food. They were totally dependent on God, and God totally met their need. That's what he's reminding them of. He said, did you lack anything? And they said, nothing. What I'm telling you is you, each and all, are lacking nothing. It's already been supplied. He brought the disciples full circle. This reminded them of their original commission. And when he sent them out and it reminded them when he sent them out on that first commission, and he went out with nothing, and God supplied all their need. God will always supply all our need, both during the good times, but especially during the bad times. Good times, sometimes you don't notice it because you're just used to believing. It's just happening. It's boom, boom, boom. Life's going boom, boom. It's just snap, 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 snap. Everything's going good my way. But when life isn't going that way, that's when you notice the great stuff of God. So it's cool. It's good to notice it both times. The 3 final lessons in believing over these 4 days. 1, believe like a child. Have full and complete expectation with no room for anything else to water it down. 2, move your mountains. You're designed to dominate. Can you see it? Do you talk about it? And 3, remember to remember. When the pressure's on, remind yourself of what you've already done and what God's already done for you. The disciples finally got it. They finally got it. He had been waiting for this point. It took the whole ministry to the night he was going to be taken into captivity. It took all that time before now they finally see bigger than themselves. Was it worth it? Those 3 things were Jesus' final lesson in believing. They will work for us too. Believe like a child, move your mountains, and remember to remember. God bless.